Hello everybody. Today I'm going to teach you how to paint this fun underwater abstract watercolor painting using just a couple of colors. I've got Phthalo Blue Green Shade and Cobalt Teal Blue. I also will be using kosher salt, coarse kosher salt, isopropyl alcohol. Little goes a long way, and I've been painting in watercolor for over 33 years now. And I really haven't done too much with salt. I've never experimented with isopropyl alcohol up until now, but salt I've been doing a little bit more with in the last several years probably. But I thought, since I haven't tried alcohol, I wanted to see how it would play with the salt. So here we have a play date with alcohol and kosher salt, and should be some fun in there. This was fun. So I liked the prompt that World Watercolor gave on the 29th of July, which was submerge. And the color Daniel Smith paired with it was Phthalo Blue Green Shade. And I loved the combination of those two. And in my mind, I thought about something submerging, something that was going down, and how it would have bubbles probably coming up as it went down. So I thought the salt would do well with that. And then in just kind of a little experimenting with the alcohol, it creates these little, to me, they look like little tiny jellyfish. So I thought that was really fun combination. So I will be using, very important, this 100%, this is 100% cotton. This is actually an empty pad, but the block under here is this artist Loft that I got at Michael's. If they still sell it, I don't know, but I think you can still maybe get it on Amazon. Anyway, it's 100% cotton. If you try to do this on a student grade paper, you are going to get inferior results. So you don't want your paper fighting you as you're trying to learn watercolor. So we want to be on the same team. Cotton watercolor paper is on the same team as a watercolor artist from beginning throughout your whole journey as a watercolor painter. So very important to use the best 100% watercolor paper you can afford. So just shop around. There's all kinds of options. And that being said, there's also differences between brands. So where one brand may lift easily, another brand may not. So it's just good to experiment and see the differences. So I'll put that aside. Also important is a good brush. You can get good brushes for, a decent price. They don't all have to be like the Kolinsky Sable. You can get very good brushes that hold a lot of paint and water. That's the important thing. This is a silver, black velvet. I splurged on this. It's beautiful. It's a 16, big body, nice fine tip, but it holds a lot of paint and water, so I can cover a lot of area with this painting. That is important, because if you have a teeny tiny brush and you're trying to paint quickly in a big area, you won't be able to do that without paint drying and making a big mess of it. So you want a good brush, big enough to paint the size of paper that you will be using. So that's very important, to have a very good brush that holds a lot of paint and water. So also the paint consistency is important. We're going to be wanting to cover an area of about 8 by 8. I measured this off. This is a 9 by 12. We've got 1/2 inch tape as a border. I like putting tape on there because once it's dried and it's finished and dried, everything's done, you peel off that paint and you've got this nice crisp edge, and it's such a nice finished look that I always like to tape my paper edges. So paint consistency, I've got my Phthalo Blue Green Shade, fresh paint. I've got some of this is dried in here, but I don't want to waste paint, so I leave it in there to use later. But fresh paint is much easier to get to the consistency that I want for this type of painting. So I'm going to want my Phthalo Blue. I'm going to put that down there. I'm going to want my Phthalo Blue to be kind of the consistency of cream, like if you can imagine half and half in this bowl and how it moves around. It's a little more sluggish than, say, a tea consistency. That's going to be very, it'll move around a lot. But we want it to be fairly thick. I'm just going to add water this way for time's sake with my spray bottle, and then start my mixing. I've got quite a bit of paint on here, but I've got a good amount of paper I want to cover, and I want it to be a very deep blue. I don't want a washed out phthalo blue. I want it to be deep, as this is in the bottom part of that painting. So I also want to have all of my supplies ready to go. I've got my salt ready. I've got my isopropyl alcohol here in this little container. And you see I used every bit of that. And I think that's going to be a pretty decent amount. So I won't have to mix up more. You don't want to have to stop and mix more paint because you ran out. The important thing with this kind of paint application and adding the salt is you want this to be the right moisture when you add that salt. So we'll talk about that as I get into this, but just for your thinking process, it needs to have enough of a sheen on this where the salt can do what salt does, which is soak up the paint. The isopropyl is going to push the paint away. The salt is going to pull the paint into itself, and that's going to create those, I guess you could call them blossoms. They kind of look like snowflakes, or they kind of look like bubbles. Kind of have that jaggedy edge. If you don't have enough moisture on your paper, you're just going to get dots. If you have too much moisture on there, you will get nothing. It's just going to dissolve and be salt water. So important to get the right timing. Got another silver here, a number 8. Again, I splurged. I usually get Princeton. I've also used Utrecht. I like round brushes. I do have flat brushes as well, but most of the time I use round brushes. So this color, I want a little bit more watery. So I'm going to get it to be a little more like maybe coffee. It's still thick, but it's not as thick as this. So when I splatter this into my painting, it's also going to push away the paint. So get that all set up. Okay, I think I have everything I need to get started. I'm going to hold this up a little bit. You could also put something underneath there like let's just do that, a tape. It's going to have the gravity pull that down a little bit. So I've got my mixture here, and I'm going to grab that. I'm also going to dip into my water just a little bit. So I had my brush fully loaded with that color, and I'm actually adding a little bit of water as I come down. This is going to dry faster, so I'm going to come up here with another loaded brush of paint and continue to bring it down. We want this to be really rich, juicy paint. Keeping an eye on that up there. Adding more from my reservoir here of paint. You can see there's a nice bead, and right up here I've got a very good sheen on that paper, and I think it's a good opportunity to hurry up, get to the bottom of this, and got a nice rich color down there that's still got a sheen on it. I'm watching that pretty carefully because I want to make sure that it's not too dry. There's just a nice sheen on it, and there's no dry spots. Too puddly down here. I'm just about 4 or 5 inches above my paper as I sprinkle that salt. And this is an opportune time to also take my little brush here and splatter some of this cobalt teal. See how that's pushing that paint away? I like that up there at the top, probably a little down here too. Over here is a little drier, so it's not spreading as far. Then we're going to take our alcohol and just tap, tappity tap on the brush. The higher up you get, the further away those blobs are going to be. I'm kind of trying to vary the pressure as I tap. Because I want some of them a little bit smaller than others. But you can see how that pushed away the deep blue. And then I've got more water, more moisture on the paper. I'm going to sprinkle some more salt. It's pretty dry where the paper is raised. There's some areas where the paper is kind of warped in. Some of it's like hills and some of it's valleys. Valleys are going to stay wetter. Now, I've got quite a bit of paint coming down here, so I'm going to take this paper towel. It's very carefully. You can also do this with a very thirsty brush, like come along here and just let it soak up that paint, or like I was going to do before, you can come right along that bottom edge, not up over the top of the paint, but the tape, but underneath, right next to it. And that paint's going to keep on draining. And we're not going to see much happening until this paint starts to dry, and then you're going to see what that salt can do. And I'm just adding a little bit more as I see the paint dry. I think there might be some areas where it might have dissolved too much, so I'm just adding a couple more little sprinkles. And I think kind of want to add, and I haven't done this one before either, maybe a little bit more sprinkles of that phthalo. You can get carried away when something is fun, so it's important to try to stop having so much fun. Don't have so much fun. Okay, so this is where you got to have a little bit of patience because we want this to completely dry on its own. Don't want to be bringing a hairdryer, and it's going to stop the process of what's happening with the salt as it's drawing in the paint, sucking in that moisture and sucking in that color. You see what's already starting to happen. So we're just going to let this sit and dry and come back to it and see what happens when we take that salt off. Now this is completely dry. Let it dry naturally. It's time to take the salt off, and I just use an old credit card. So we're just going to scrape, and it's flying everywhere, but I'm trying to guard it with my hand. This down here, it's a little harder to get off because there was a lot more moisture down there, but let's take that off. Do this over a garbage can if you want to make it a little less messy. All right, so now there's quite a bit of salt activity in here. So maybe I want to tone down some of it. So I can take my big silver brush. Let's call this guy Big Silver. This is Big Silver. And maybe just make some swirls. Now, I want to tell you that some of this is kind of moving around, which is what I want. I don't want all of these to stand out quite so much, but maybe dab a little off. But let's just get some of that cobalt teal and flood it around. You can just work around some of those. Maybe a little deeper down in here. Up at the top, my imagination thinks that they would be a little bit lighter because the light's pouring in maybe from above. So I don't want to make it too dark. But down here, it's a deeper part of the ocean, right? So let's just kind of work around some of those, but give a little deeper blue down at the bottom. Blot with your paper towel. You got to kind of keep your eye moving around. Make sure that you're well aware of what's going on. Kind of like your kids, you know. You can't just leave them to their own devices all the time. Now there's water on the paper, so that paint will kind of flow and soften. So I just wanted to add a little extra teal. I do like that. I do like that color. And I like the combo. And I said only 2 colors, but white isn't a color, remember? This is gouache. Got Winsor & Newton. This is permanent white. And I think I'm just going to kind of blot up a little. Because when I put this gouache down, when I splatter this gouache in there, I want it to not spread quite as far. If there's too much water on the paper, it's going to just spread. And then you won't really notice it. But if I wait too long and there's not enough moisture on the paper, then I'm going to get dots. So I want it to soften a little bit. Let's just see. One thing about gouache is it does dry. This is going to dry darker. But I do want to kind of have a few pretty good bubbles. I'm imagining. And see how that works when it gets dried out. I also could put a little bit of the blue in, the teal blue, and just get a little. Don't want to do too much. And you know, like I said before, when you're having fun, it's hard to stop having fun. So you have to kind of be careful about how much fun you're having. So you could easily get carried away. Don't want to do that, but I do want just a little extra here and there. Maybe not as much down below. Let's go again and do just a couple of little. Couple of little splatters of that blue. And let's see what happens if I get thick cobalt teal. So now we can let this dry. See what happens. I think that's just a little too much there. Let me dot that out a little bit. Okay, so this one I could probably go ahead and speed up with the hair dryer and then go ahead and sign it. Okay, once it's dry, it flattens back out pretty well for the most part. You could also, if it was a little too lumpy for your liking, you can get the back of it spritzed and lay it between. I've laid it between parchment paper before and then put books over the top of it. But you can flatten it back out even further if you like. I'm just going to sign it real quick. I got my gouache here still in. and a teeny tiny #1 round. This is a Princeton. I like these Velvet Touch. I mentioned I liked Princeton earlier. So I will sign it right over here. I feel like that's a little too light. I like to sign small. So teeny tiny little lines. The older I get, the blinder I get, the more I probably will need to figure out a different way to sign my name. But for now, I've got the year. I stopped doing that for a while, and then I decided to put the year back in just so I could have a marker, you know, like what year I did certain things. I was losing track. So now comes the fun part. We're going to take that tape off. This one, the sides I put on last. So look at that crisp, clean edge. I love it. Side #2. Side number top. Side number top. Top of the painting. And bottom. Look how nice that looks with that crisp edge. Now, I have done this multiple times, so I could actually frame each of these and do like a little series. Hang them on a wall in a group would be kind of cool. So you guys, I hope you liked this video. Go ahead and like and subscribe. And also I will put a link in the description to a video that, or I'll pop it up on the screen, to a video that talks more about paint to water ratios and the moisture on your paper, the level of moisture on your paper when you're painting those different ones. So go ahead and click on that one if you want to learn more about the paint to water ratios. So until next time, take care, happy painting, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.